My father and my brother did this, Maya Williams whispered to the billionaire standing above her. But those words were not the beginning of the night. They were the end of a desperate escape. Only minutes earlier, Maya Williams had been running through the freezing streets of Manhattan with 3 men chasing her through the dark. The wind cut through the narrow avenue as her bare feet struck the pavement again and again. Her lungs burned. Each breath felt like ice in her chest, but she forced herself forward. Behind her, the men were getting closer. "Stop her!" one of them shouted. Their voices echoed between parked cars and brick buildings. Maya didn't dare look back again. She already knew who they were. They worked for the same man her father had sold her to, Victor Hale, and if they caught her tonight, she would disappear. But Maya was not running only to save herself. She was running to stop something worse. Only an hour earlier, she had overheard the conversation that shattered everything she believed about her family, her father, her brother, and a plan to kidnap one of the most powerful men in New York, Daniel Whitmore. Maya had been standing quietly in the hallway of her father's small apartment in Queens when she heard them talking inside the kitchen. At first, she thought it was another argument about money that had become normal in the Carter household over the past year. But then she heard a name that made her stop breathing. Whitmore. Daniel Whitmore. Her brother Brandon had been laughing. "He walks out of that building every Thursday night," Brandon said. "Same time, same car, same driver." Her father's voice followed. "And once we grab him, Hale clears the entire debt." Maya's stomach had turned cold. "You're sure Whitmore doesn't suspect anything?" Brandon asked. "He trusts me," their father replied. "I told Hale the Whitmore name is already backing our deal." Maya had stepped back from the hallway slowly, her heart pounding. They weren't just planning a crime, they were planning to kidnap Daniel Whitmore, and they were using his own name to do it. The floor creaked beneath Maya's foot. The voices inside the kitchen stopped. Her brother opened the door, and the moment Brandon Carter saw her face, he knew she had heard everything. The next 30 minutes had moved fast, too fast. Her father shouting, her brother grabbing her arm, 2 strangers entering the apartment, men she had never seen before, men working for Victor Hale. "You shouldn't have listened," her father told her coldly. Then came the decision that ended her life as she knew it. "If she knows about the plan," Brandon said, "she's a liability." Victor Hale had offered a simple solution. The debt her father owed, $420,000, would disappear. In exchange for Maya, they were already making the call when Maya fought her way free and ran. She escaped through the bathroom window, falling hard onto the alley pavement below. Now she was running through Manhattan trying to reach the only person who could stop what was coming, Daniel Whitmore. She turned the final corner onto East 72nd Street, and there it was, the brownstone townhouse, lights glowing above the entrance, a black town car waiting at the curb, 2 security guards standing at the door, and Daniel Whitmore himself stepping onto the top stair. Maya pushed the last of her strength into her legs and ran toward him. Daniel Whitmore had been preparing to leave for the night. His driver waited beside the town car while the quiet street rested under the soft glow of the streetlights. Daniel Whitmore was 42 years old, founder of Whitmore Technologies, a billionaire investor whose influence stretched from New York to Silicon Valley. People described him in many ways. Some called him brilliant, some called him ruthless, but the word that followed him everywhere was controlled. Daniel Whitmore rarely reacted before thinking, which was why the sudden figure running toward his house caught his attention instantly. Marcus Reed, Daniel's lead security guard, moved first. "Sir," Marcus said sharply. His body stepped between Daniel and the approaching woman. Maya reached the base of the stairs. Her legs failed her. She collapsed forward onto the pavement. Marcus grabbed her arm immediately. "Stop right there," he said. "You can't be here." 2. Maya tried to pull free. "Please," she gasped. Marcus held firm. Before he could drag her away, Daniel Whitmore raised one finger. Marcus stopped immediately. The young woman lifted her head slowly. One eye was swollen nearly shut. Her lip was split. Dark bruises circled both wrists, yet the eye that remained open was sharp, focused. "My father and my brother did this," Maya Williams whispered again to Daniel Whitmore. Marcus frowned. Daniel stepped down one stair. Cold wind drifted through the street. He studied her carefully. The broken fingernails on her right hand suggested she had clawed at something recently. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. She had been running. "What's your name?" Daniel asked calmly. "Maya," she said softly. A pause followed. "Maya Williams." Marcus glanced over his shoulder. Sir, she needs medical attention. No, Maya said quickly. They'll find me there. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Who will? My father, Maya said. Her chest rose and fell sharply. My brother, she hesitated. And the men they sent after me. Marcus's expression hardened. Daniel Whitmore did not move. Why are they chasing you? He asked. Maya forced herself upright slightly. Because I found out what they were planning, she said. What were they planning? Maya looked straight at him. They're going to kidnap you. If you were in Maya's place, would you have done the same thing she did? If your answer is yes, take a moment to press like on this video to show your support for Maya, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You might be surprised someone very close to you could be watching this story at the same time. The street fell silent again. Marcus stared at her. That's ridiculous. Daniel lifted one finger. Marcus stopped speaking. Maya continued. My father owes money, she said, and someone offered to clear the debt. Daniel waited. In exchange for you. Snowflakes drifted through the air above them. Daniel's expression remained calm. He used my name, Daniel said quietly. Yes. To sell his daughter. Yes. Marcus turned toward the dark street again instinctively. Daniel Whitmore studied Maya Williams carefully. Her shoulders trembled from cold, yet the eye watching him remained steady. You could have gone anywhere tonight, Daniel said. Why come here? Because if they lied about you, Maya said. Then you'd want to know. A faint tremor passed through her voice. And if they didn't, then you were the only person powerful enough to stop them. Daniel Whitmore was silent for 4 seconds. Then he spoke. Marcus. Yes, sir. Call Dr. Feldman. Marcus blinked. Sir, and tell Mrs. Jenkins to prepare the east guest room. Marcus stared at him. You're bringing her inside? Daniel Whitmore looked down at Maya again. Snowflakes clung to the edges of her braids. Yes, Daniel said calmly. Marcus nodded and stepped aside to make the call. Daniel removed his coat. It was a heavy wool overcoat. Instead of placing it on her shoulders himself, he set it gently beside her. You can take that, he said. Maya wrapped the coat around herself. Warmth slowly returned to her frozen arms. Daniel turned toward the door. Then he paused. Maya Williams, he said. She looked up. Yes? You should understand something before you come inside. She waited. Daniel Whitmore's voice remained calm. If what you told me tonight is true, he said quietly, then someone has just made a very serious mistake. He opened the door, and I intend to correct it. The door of Daniel Whitmore's townhouse closed behind them, with a quiet, solid sound that seemed to separate 2 different worlds. Outside, the cold Manhattan night continued moving the way it always did, wind along the sidewalks, distant traffic, snow settling on parked cars. Inside, warmth. Soft light from recessed lamps reflected against polished wood floors and tall cream-colored walls. The entrance hall smelled faintly of cedar and fresh coffee, the kind of quiet scent that belonged to a home that had been carefully maintained for years. Maya Williams stood just inside the doorway, her body still trembling, not from fear now. From the sudden absence of cold, her bare feet rested on the marble floor while the heavy wool coat Daniel had given her hung loosely around her shoulders. Snow melted slowly in her braids, small droplets falling onto the polished surface beneath her. For several seconds, no one spoke. Marcus remained near the door, his eyes moving toward the security monitors built into the wall beside the entrance. Daniel Whitmore walked past Maya without touching her and removed his gloves with calm, deliberate movements. He had not rushed her. He had not questioned her again. He simply stepped farther into the house and said one word. Marcus. Yes, sir. Lock the doors. Marcus moved immediately. Heavy electronic locks engaged with quiet clicks as he sealed the entrance and checked the surveillance feed from the cameras outside. Snow drifted across the steps where Maya had collapsed only minutes earlier. The street beyond remained empty. Daniel turned slightly toward Maya. You're safe here for the moment, he said. The phrase was precise. For the moment, Maya understood what that meant. She wrapped the coat tighter around herself and nodded faintly. Before she could speak, another figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. Mrs. Jenkins. Eleanor Jenkins had managed Daniel Whitmore's household for nearly 20 years. She was a tall woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun and the calm, steady posture of someone who had seen nearly everything life could offer. She stopped when she saw Maya. For just a moment, her eyes widened. Then the professional composure returned. Mr. Whitmore, she said gently. Mrs. Jenkins, Daniel replied. Dr. Feldman is already on his way. Daniel nodded once. Good. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Maya again. Her voice softened. Dear, you must be freezing. Maya tried to answer. But the warmth of the house was beginning to affect her in ways she hadn't expected. The tension that had kept her body moving for hours was fading, and with it came a sudden wave of exhaustion. I'm okay, she said quietly. Mrs. Jenkins gave her a look that older women reserve for young people who clearly are not okay. We'll fix that in a moment, she said. She turned toward Daniel. The East guest room is ready. Thank you. Daniel gestured lightly toward the hallway. Go with Mrs. Jenkins, he told Maya. You'll be more comfortable upstairs. Maya hesitated. The question forming in her mind felt almost foolish compared to everything that had already happened that night, but she asked it anyway. You believe me? Daniel Whitmore looked at her calmly. I believe you are frightened, he said. That much is obvious. That's not the same thing, Maya said quietly. No, Daniel agreed. It isn't. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Daniel Whitmore had spent most of his adult life reading people across conference tables and negotiation rooms. He had learned long ago that desperation could make honest people sound like liars, and liars sound convincing. But Maya Williams did not look like someone inventing a story. Her injuries alone suggested something real had happened, and the name she had mentioned, Victor Hale, was not unfamiliar. Daniel turned toward Marcus. Call Pierce. Marcus nodded immediately. Detective Pierce? Yes. Tell him I may have information regarding Victor Hale's operations. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. Tonight? Tonight. Marcus stepped away to make the call. Maya watched the exchange carefully. You already know who Victor Hale is, she said. Daniel did not answer immediately. Go upstairs with Mrs. Jenkins, he said. That conversation will happen soon enough. Mrs. Jenkins placed a gentle hand near Maya's shoulder, careful not to startle her. Come along, dear. Maya allowed herself to be guided toward the staircase. The steps were wide and carpeted in deep navy fabric, the kind that softened footsteps and carried almost no sound. As she climbed, Maya glanced back once. Daniel Whitmore stood in the entrance hall, speaking quietly with Marcus. Calm, controlled, as if the words kidnapping and conspiracy had been part of his evening schedule. Upstairs, the East guest room was larger than Maya's entire apartment in Queens. Soft lamplight filled the room. A large bed sat against the far wall beneath tall windows that overlooked a quiet courtyard dusted with snow. Mrs. Jenkins moved efficiently through the space. Bathroom is through there, she said gently. Clean towels are already inside. She opened a dresser drawer and removed folded clothing. These should fit well enough for tonight. Maya stared at the neatly folded sweater and cotton pants. You keep clothes for strangers? She asked. Mrs. Jenkins smiled slightly. In this house, she said, Mr. Whitmore occasionally finds people who need help. Maya sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped beneath her weight, soft enough that her body immediately felt heavier. Does that happen often? She asked. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. No. She studied Maya for a moment, but when it does, it usually means something important has happened. A knock sounded softly at the door. Mrs. Jenkins opened it. Dr. Feldman entered with a small medical bag in hand. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to emergencies that arrived without warning. Well, he said gently when he saw Maya, you've had quite a night. Within minutes he was examining her wrist, her bruises, the swelling around her eye. Fracture, he murmured, while gently adjusting her arm. Not broken, but close. He wrapped her wrist carefully in a temporary splint. You should consider pain medication. Maya shook her head. Not yet. Dr. Feldman raised an eyebrow. Most people change their minds about that fairly quickly. I need to stay clear, Maya said. Why? Because I still haven't told him everything. Dr. Feldman finished tying the bandage and looked toward the hallway. Mr. Whitmore tends to be patient, he said. Maya wasn't sure about that. Downstairs, Daniel Whitmore stood alone in his study. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the fireplace. Marcus entered and closed the door. Pierce is on his way, he said. Daniel nodded. And the men who were chasing her? Marcus checked his phone. Our cameras caught them turning the corner 2 minutes after we brought her inside. 3 men, Marcus continued. They didn't approach the house. Good, Daniel said softly. Marcus leaned slightly against the doorframe. You believe her story? Daniel Whitmore looked toward the window. Snow continued to fall across the courtyard. "Marcus," he said calmly, "if what she overheard is true." He paused. "Then someone is planning to kidnap me." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what she said." Daniel Whitmore picked up his phone. "Then tonight," he said quietly, "we find out exactly how serious that plan is." Maya Williams did not sleep that night. She tried. After Dr. Feldman finished wrapping her wrist, and Mrs. Jenkins left the room with a quiet promise to bring tea if she needed it, Maya lay back against the soft pillows of the east guest bed. The mattress felt too comfortable, too safe. Her body, however, refused to relax. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the voices again. Her brother's laughter in the kitchen. Her father saying Daniel Whitmore's name like it was a bargaining chip. The moment Brandon had opened the door and realized she had heard everything, Maya opened her eyes again. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. She pushed herself upright slowly, careful with the splint on her wrist. The pain had begun to spread through her arm, now that the adrenaline was gone. Outside the window, snow continued falling into the quiet courtyard. For the first time since she escaped the apartment in Queens, Maya allowed herself to breathe deeply. But the feeling didn't last long, because somewhere downstairs, men were discussing whether her story was true, and if it was, a kidnapping plot was already in motion. Downstairs in the study, Daniel Whitmore sat behind his desk while Marcus Reed stood near the fireplace. A third man had just arrived. Detective Alan Pierce of the NYPD looked exactly like someone who had been pulled out of bed at 1 in the morning. His coat still carried the cold from outside, and faint snowflakes clung to his dark hair. He glanced around the study. "Nice place," Pierce said. Daniel didn't respond to the comment. "Thank you for coming quickly," he said. Pierce shrugged and dropped into one of the leather chairs. "When a billionaire calls in the middle of the night and mentions Victor Hale, I assume it's not a social visit." Marcus closed the study door behind him. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "A woman arrived here tonight," he said. Pierce waited. "She claims her father and brother are working with Hale." "That's not surprising," Pierce said. "Hale has a lot of people working for him." Daniel's voice remained calm. "She also claims they're planning to kidnap me." That got Pierce's attention. He leaned forward slowly. "Well," he said, "that's new." Daniel slid a tablet across the desk. Marcus had already pulled up the exterior camera footage. The video showed Maya running toward the townhouse, stumbling onto the steps, then 3 distant figures appearing briefly at the corner of the street. Pierce watched carefully. "Those your security cameras?" "Yes." Pierce replayed the clip. "They stopped when they saw the guards," he said. "Looks that way," Marcus replied. Pierce leaned back in his chair. "You said the girl overheard a plan," he said to Daniel. "Yes. Do you trust her?" Daniel considered the question. "I trust that she believes what she heard." Pierce gave a faint smile. "That's not the same thing." "No," Daniel agreed, "but it's enough to investigate." Pierce rubbed his chin. "Victor Hale usually doesn't move personally on something like this," he said. "He hires people." Marcus crossed his arms. "Which means the people chasing her tonight may just be cleanup." Pierce nodded. "Exactly." Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Daniel spoke again. "I want to know if Hale has been watching me." Pierce let out a slow breath. "You're asking if a criminal organization is planning to abduct one of the most well-protected businessmen in New York." "Yes." Pierce leaned forward again. "Then we start with the girl," he said. "What she heard, when she heard it, and how much she actually understands." Daniel nodded once. "Marcus." "Yes, sir." "Ask Mrs. Jenkins if Miss Williams is awake." Marcus stepped out briefly and returned less than a minute later. "She's awake," he said. Daniel stood. "Bring her downstairs." Upstairs, Maya had just finished wrapping a blanket around her shoulders when she heard a soft knock. Mrs. Jenkins opened the door gently. "Mr. Whitmore would like to speak with you," she said. Maya hesitated. "Now?" "Yes, dear." Mrs. Jenkins offered a reassuring smile. "There's a detective here as well." Maya nodded slowly. Her legs felt weaker than before, but she stood anyway. Mrs. Jenkins walked beside her down the staircase. When Maya entered the study, 3 men turned toward her. Daniel Whitmore stood beside his desk. Marcus Reed leaned against the wall, and a tall man with tired eyes and a worn coat studied her carefully. "Miss Williams," Daniel said calmly. "This is Detective Alan Pierce." Pierce stood. "Evening," he said. Maya nodded. Pierce gestured toward the chair. "Sit down before you fall down again." Maya lowered herself carefully into the leather chair. Her splinted wrist rested awkwardly in her lap. Pierce spoke first. "Mr. Whitmore tells me you overheard a conversation tonight," he said. "Yes. Let's start from the beginning." Maya looked down at her hands briefly. Then she began. She described the apartment, the kitchen, her brother talking about Daniel Whitmore's schedule, her father explaining how Victor Hale would erase the debt after the kidnapping. As she spoke, the room remained silent. Pierce didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he leaned back slowly. "You're certain they used Mr. Whitmore's name?" "Yes." "And Hale believed them?" "My father said Hale wouldn't check," Maya replied. "Why?" "Because people like Hale don't ask powerful men questions." Pierce nodded thoughtfully. "That part is unfortunately true." Marcus shifted slightly. "So what happens now?" Pierce looked at Daniel. "Well," he said, "either the girl overheard a desperate fantasy from two idiots who owe money," he paused, "or someone is preparing a very dangerous mistake." Daniel Whitmore folded his hands calmly. "And which option do you believe?" Pierce studied Maya again. The bruises, the exhaustion, the fear she was clearly trying to control. "I believe she heard something real," Pierce said finally. He stood. "And if Victor Hale thinks he can grab you," Pierce pulled on his coat, "then tomorrow morning we're going to make sure he learns why that's a terrible idea." Detective Alan Pierce did not leave immediately after saying those words. Instead, he remained standing beside Daniel Whitmore's desk, studying Maya Williams with the patient, careful attention of a man who had spent 20 years learning how to recognize truth hiding behind fear. The room was quiet. The fire in the study fireplace crackled softly, throwing warm light across the dark wooden shelves and the leather chairs. Maya sat very still. Now that she had finished speaking, the adrenaline that carried her through the night was fading again. Her injured wrist throbbed beneath the splint doctor. Feldman had wrapped around it, and exhaustion pressed against her shoulders like weight. Pierce finally spoke. "You said your brother mentioned Thursdays." Maya nodded. "Yes." "Explain." "He said Mr. Whitmore leaves a building every Thursday night, same time." Pierce turned toward Daniel. "That true?" Daniel did not hesitate. "Yes." Pierce let out a slow breath. "That's not great." Marcus Reed shifted near the wall. "We vary the route." "Route doesn't matter," Pierce replied. "If someone knows the schedule, they can create the opportunity." Daniel's expression remained calm. "My schedule is not public." "No," Pierce said. "But your meetings are." He turned back toward Maya. "Your brother mentioned which building?" "The Whitmore Foundation office," Maya answered. Daniel nodded once. "That's correct." Pierce rubbed his chin. "So they were watching you." Marcus frowned. "Or someone inside the building was talking." That possibility hung in the air for a moment. Daniel Whitmore did not show it, but the idea registered clearly. Information leaks did not happen in his organization. Not by accident. Pierce walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the snow-covered courtyard. "Victor Hale doesn't gamble," he said. "If he's planning something like this, he's confident." Marcus crossed his arms. "Confident people make mistakes." Pierce turned back. "Yes," he said, "and sometimes those mistakes involve kidnapping a billionaire." Maya shifted slightly in the chair. "Detective," she said quietly. Pierce looked at her. "You said Hale hires people." "That's right." "Then the men chasing me tonight, probably not Hale himself," Pierce said, "but someone working for him." Maya swallowed. "My father sounded afraid of him." Pierce nodded. "Your father should be." He walked back toward the desk. "Victor Hale built his business on debt," Pierce continued. "Illegal loans, smuggling, trafficking, whatever brings cash." Marcus frowned. "And people who owe him? Eventually they pay," Pierce said. "Or they disappear." Silence settled again. Daniel Whitmore finally spoke. "What do you recommend?" Pierce shrugged. "First thing in the morning we start pulling Hale's financial records." "That takes time," Marcus said. "Yes." Marcus looked toward Daniel. "Time we might not have." Pierce nodded slowly. "That's the other problem." He gestured toward Maya. "If your father told Hale that Mr. Whitmore's name was already connected to the deal," Maya finished the sentence quietly. "Then Hale thinks Mr. Whitmore already knows." Pierce pointed at her. "Exactly." Marcus looked toward Daniel. "So Hale may think the kidnapping is already approved." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, which meant something worse. Hale might not delay. He might move immediately. Pierce checked his watch. "It's almost 2 in the morning," he said. Kidnapping crews usually work early morning hours. Marcus moved away from the wall. You think they'll try tonight? Pierce shrugged again. If Hale believes Whitmore already agreed to the arrangement, he might think the window is open. Daniel Whitmore stood. The movement immediately shifted the energy in the room. Marcus. Yes, sir. Call the rest of the security team. Marcus nodded and pulled out his phone. We double coverage on every entrance, Daniel continued. No one leaves the property until morning. Pierce raised an eyebrow. You expecting visitors? Daniel looked toward the window again. I prefer preparation. Marcus finished sending messages and looked up. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Pierce turned toward Maya. You did the right thing coming here, he said. Maya wasn't sure she believed that. My father will know I told you, she said quietly. Pierce's voice softened slightly. He probably already assumes that. Maya lowered her eyes. My brother will be angry. Your brother should be worried, Pierce said. She looked up again. Why? Pierce gave a thin smile. Because if Victor Hale realizes your father lied about Whitmore backing the deal, he paused. Your father becomes a problem. Marcus understood immediately. And Hale doesn't keep problems around. Maya felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Daniel Whitmore walked toward the fireplace slowly. Miss Williams, she looked up. Yes? You said your brother mentioned Thursday. Yes. Daniel nodded. That meeting is tomorrow. The room fell silent again. Pierce exhaled slowly. Well, he said. That simplifies things. Marcus looked at him. How? One, Pierce smiled faintly. Because if Hale's crew plans to grab Whitmore tomorrow night. He pulled his coat tighter. We can be waiting for them. Maya stared at him. You mean a trap? Pierce shrugged. Something like that. Marcus looked at Daniel. Sir? 2. Daniel Whitmore stood quietly for a moment. Then he nodded. Yes. Pierce's smile widened slightly. Good. Daniel turned toward Maya. Miss Williams. Yes. You've helped us more than you realize tonight. Maya wasn't sure how to respond. She had come only to warn him. She had not expected to become part of a plan. Daniel's voice remained calm. For the rest of tonight, he said, you should rest. Maya almost laughed at the idea. Sleep felt impossible, but she nodded anyway. Mrs. Jenkins appeared quietly in the doorway. Mr. Whitmore? Yes. More security has arrived. Marcus checked the monitor near the wall. 2 additional vehicles were pulling up outside. Pierce walked toward the door. I'll coordinate with the patrol units, he said. Quietly. Daniel nodded once. Pierce stopped beside Maya as he passed. You're safe here, he said quietly. At least safer than most places tonight. Maya watched him leave the room. The study grew quieter again. Daniel Whitmore stood beside the fireplace, looking down at the burning logs. Marcus approached him. You really think they'll try it? He asked. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Yes. Marcus folded his arms. Then tomorrow night could get interesting. Daniel Whitmore's voice remained steady. Yes, he said. I believe it will. Maya Williams finally slept just before dawn. It wasn't a deep sleep. It was the kind of sleep that comes when exhaustion defeats fear for a few quiet hours. Outside the tall windows of the east guest room, the snow had stopped falling sometime around 4 in the morning. By sunrise, the courtyard behind Daniel Whitmore's townhouse looked peaceful again. A soft white blanket covering the stone paths and frozen garden beds. Inside the house, however, nothing about the morning felt peaceful. Security guards moved quietly through the hallways. Phones rang, doors opened and closed in careful rhythm, and downstairs in the study, Daniel Whitmore had already begun planning the day. Marcus Reed stood beside the large digital display on the wall, reviewing security reports from the night shift. 4 additional guards arrived around 3, Marcus said. 2 at the front entrance, 2 covering the rear courtyard. Daniel sat at his desk, reading through a set of emails on his tablet. Any movement outside? Marcus shook his head. Nothing suspicious since the 3 men passed the corner last night. Daniel looked up. Pierce? Marcus checked his phone. Already at the precinct. He said he'd start pulling information on Victor Hale's accounts. Daniel nodded once. Marcus hesitated for a moment. What about the meeting tonight? Daniel closed the tablet slowly. The meeting happens. Marcus studied him carefully. You're still planning to attend the foundation event? Yes. Marcus frowned. That's exactly where they said the kidnapping might happen. Daniel's voice remained calm, which makes it the best place to see who shows up. Marcus sighed quietly. You really enjoy walking into danger. Daniel looked at him. No, he said. I enjoy removing it. Upstairs, Maya woke slowly. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the room too quiet. Then her wrist throbbed, and the memories returned. The apartment in Queens, her brother's voice, running through the snow. Daniel Whitmore's face above her on the stone steps. Maya sat up carefully. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows now, pale and winter gray. The blanket Mrs. Jenkins had left around her shoulders slid gently into her lap. She looked down at her splinted wrist. The pain had settled into a dull ache. A soft knock sounded at the door. Come in, Maya said. Mrs. Jenkins entered, carrying a small tray. Good morning, dear. Maya blinked at the warm smell rising from the tray. Coffee, toast, scrambled eggs. I didn't know if you'd slept, Mrs. Jenkins said kindly. Maya gave a faint smile. A little. Mrs. Jenkins placed the tray beside the bed. You'll need strength today. Maya looked up. What's happening today? Mrs. Jenkins paused for a moment. Well, she said gently. Whitmore rarely changes his schedule. That sentence told Maya more than she expected. The meeting tonight, she said quietly. Mrs. Jenkins nodded. Yes. Maya stared at the coffee for a moment. They're still going. Mr. Whitmore believes it's necessary. Maya picked up the cup slowly. The warmth of it felt good in her hands. Is he always like that? She asked. Mrs. Jenkins smiled faintly. Yes. Maya took a sip. The bitterness of the coffee helped clear the last fog of sleep from her mind. Can I talk to him? She asked. Mrs. Jenkins nodded. He's in the study. 20 minutes later, Maya walked slowly down the staircase. Her borrowed sweater hung loosely around her shoulders, and the cotton pants Mrs. Jenkins had provided brushed softly against the carpeted steps. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused. The study door stood slightly open. Inside, Daniel Whitmore and Marcus Reed were studying something on the large screen. 3 vehicles registered to Hale's shell companies, Marcus was saying. Daniel noticed Maya first. Good morning, Miss Williams. Marcus turned. Maya stepped inside. I heard about the meeting tonight. Daniel gestured toward the chair. Please sit. She remained standing. You're still going? Yes. You shouldn't. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. Maya continued. My brother said they planned it carefully, she said. They've been watching your routine for weeks. Daniel listened quietly. They know your car, she added. They know your driver. Marcus spoke. We're adjusting the route. That won't matter, Maya said. Marcus frowned slightly. Why not? Maya hesitated. Then she said something she had not told them the night before. My brother said there was someone inside. The room went still. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Inside where? The building, Maya said. The Whitmore Foundation office. Marcus straightened. You're sure? Yes. My brother said someone working there told them your exact schedule. Marcus looked toward Daniel. That explains how they knew about Thursdays. Daniel remained silent for a moment. Did your brother say who? Maya shook her head. No, Marcus muttered under his breath. Great. Daniel stood and walked slowly toward the window. Snow still covered the courtyard outside, reflecting the pale morning light. If someone inside the foundation is working with Hale, he said calmly, then tonight becomes even more interesting. Maya stared at him. You're still going? Yes. She stepped forward. You don't understand. Daniel turned back toward her. Then explain. Maya took a breath. My father said the kidnapping had to happen quickly, she said. Why? Because Hale is impatient. Marcus nodded slowly. That sounds right. Maya's voice trembled slightly now. And if the kidnapping fails? She stopped. Daniel finished the thought. Hale will want someone to blame. Maya nodded. My father. Marcus folded his arms. And possibly your brother. Yes. Silence settled again. Daniel Whitmore studied Maya carefully. You risked your life to warn me, he said. Maya didn't respond. You ran through the night, Daniel continued. Escaped men who were trying to capture you. Yes. Why? Maya looked down briefly. Then she answered honestly. Because someone needed to stop them. Daniel watched her for a moment longer. Then he nodded. Then we will. Marcus looked between them. Tonight, he said quietly. This turns into a trap. Daniel Whitmore's voice remained steady. Yes, he said. And if Victor Hale truly believes he can kidnap me, he paused. Tonight he learns he was wrong. The morning moved quickly inside Daniel Whitmore's townhouse. By 8 o'clock, the quiet house had turned into something closer to a command center. Security personnel walked in and out of the study carrying tablets and printed reports. Phones rang every few minutes. The large display screen on the wall showed several camera feeds from outside the building, along with a map of the surrounding blocks. Maya Williams sat near the far end of the room, watching everything unfold. She had never seen a world like this before. Men spoke calmly about surveillance, routes, vehicle switches, police coordination, things that sounded almost unreal compared to the small, crowded apartment where she had grown up. Daniel Whitmore stood at the center of it all. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't rushing. He simply listened, asked precise questions, and made decisions that the others immediately carried out. Marcus Reed tapped the screen on the wall. "We've confirmed 3 vehicles connected to Victor Hale," he said. Images of license plates appeared beside the map. 2 SUVs and a delivery van. Detective Pierce's voice came through the speakerphone on the desk. "Those plates belong to shell companies," Pierce said. "But they've shown up near Whitmore Foundation offices twice in the past week." Marcus glanced toward Daniel. "That means surveillance." Daniel nodded once. "Probably," Pierce continued. "My team is keeping distance for now. If Hale's people are watching, we don't want them spooked." Marcus crossed his arms. "So tonight we let them believe everything is normal." "Exactly," Pierce replied. Daniel turned toward the table. "The foundation event still begins at 7, he said. Marcus nodded. "Board members arrive around 6:30, and I leave the building at 8:15. Daniel continued. "That's the usual schedule," Marcus confirmed. Maya shifted in her chair. "That's when they planned it." The room quieted slightly as several of the security men looked toward her. Daniel acknowledged her with a small nod. "Yes." He turned back to Marcus. "We adjust the exit route." Marcus shook his head. "No." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Marcus continued. "If we change the route now, whoever inside the building is feeding information to Hale will notice." Daniel considered that. Marcus was right. "Then we keep the route," Daniel said. Maya looked alarmed. "You're walking straight into it." Daniel looked toward her calmly. "Yes." She stared at him. "That's insane." Marcus gave a faint smile. "Maybe." Pierce's voice returned through the speaker. "It's also effective." Maya looked between them. "You're using yourself as bait." Daniel didn't deny it. "If Hale believes the plan will succeed," he said quietly, "he will send his best people." Pierce added, "And we'll be waiting." Maya folded her arms. "That's still dangerous." Marcus leaned slightly against the desk. "Miss Williams," he said, "danger is already here." She didn't argue, because she knew he was right. Daniel stepped away from the desk. "There's another issue," he said. Marcus looked up. "The insider." Everyone in the room understood immediately. Someone inside the Whitmore Foundation building had leaked Daniel's schedule. Someone who might still be working there. Marcus spoke. "I can run a quiet review of staff records." Daniel shook his head. "Too slow." Pierce's voice cut in again. "Actually, we might not need records." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Pierce continued. "If Hale's crew plans to grab Whitmore tonight, the insider will want confirmation he's leaving on schedule." Marcus's expression changed. "So whoever it is will probably contact Hale today." "Exactly," Pierce said. Daniel looked toward the large display. "Monitor every call leaving the building." Marcus nodded. "We can track outgoing connections through the office network." "And if someone steps outside to make a private call?" Daniel asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "Then the cameras will see them." Across the room, Maya listened carefully. She suddenly realized something. "My brother said something else," she said quietly. All eyes turned toward her. "What?" Marcus asked. "He said the team doing the kidnapping wouldn't recognize you." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Explain." "They only knew your car," Maya said. Marcus frowned. "That's normal." "No," Maya replied. "My brother said Hale didn't want his men seeing Whitmore before the job." The room grew quiet. Pierce spoke through the speaker. "That's interesting." Marcus looked toward Daniel. "Why would Hale do that?" Pierce answered. "Control." He paused. "If the crew never sees Whitmore's face beforehand, they can't identify him later if something goes wrong." Daniel nodded slowly. That made sense. Criminal operations often used layers of ignorance. Maya leaned forward. "My brother said they'd grab the car and force the driver to stop." Marcus's voice hardened slightly. "Good luck with that." Maya glanced toward him. "You're the driver tonight?" Marcus gave a small nod. "Yes." Maya studied him for a moment. Then she said something quietly. My brother also said Hale's men would be desperate. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Why? Because the debt my father owes isn't the only one. Daniel looked toward her. Explain. Maya hesitated. Then she spoke carefully. My father wasn't the first person Hale used for this. The room went still again. Pierce's voice came softly through the speaker. Meaning? Hale has tried kidnapping wealthy people before, Maya said. Marcus straightened. That's not in any police reports. Because it failed, Maya replied. Pierce muttered something under his breath. Daniel stepped closer. And Hale still wants to try again. Maya nodded. Yes. Daniel looked toward the map on the wall. Then he spoke quietly. Tonight ends this. Marcus folded his arms again. I hope you're right. Pierce added through the speaker. Either way, tonight we learned something. Daniel Whitmore turned toward Maya. You've already changed the outcome of this story, he said. Doe wasn't sure what that meant yet, but she felt something shift in the room. The tension had become sharper now, more focused. The plan was no longer theoretical. It was real, and by the time night came, someone would make a move. Marcus checked the clock on the wall. 9:20 in the morning. He looked at Daniel. We've got about 10 hours. Daniel Whitmore nodded slowly. That's enough time. Then he added quietly, to prepare for a very serious mistake. By late morning, the snow in Manhattan had begun to melt. Thin streams of water slid along the edges of the sidewalks, and the gray sky above the city carried that quiet heaviness that comes before another storm. From the windows of Daniel Whitmore's townhouse, the city looked ordinary again. Taxis moving, people hurrying to offices, coffee shops filling with the usual morning crowd. But inside the house, the tension had only grown sharper. In the study, the large screen on the wall now displayed a live camera feed from the Whitmore Foundation building several blocks away. Small colored markers showed the positions of security staff, vehicles, and nearby patrol units that Detective Pierce had quietly arranged. Marcus Reed leaned over the desk, studying the information. We've got eyes on every entrance, he said. Front lobby, underground parking, service alley. Daniel Whitmore stood beside the window, his posture calm as always. His attention divided between the screen and the quiet courtyard outside. Good, he said. Marcus glanced at him. You still planning to go in person? Yes. Marcus exhaled slowly. You know, most CEOs would cancel the meeting and hide for a week. Daniel turned his head slightly. I'm not most CEOs. Marcus couldn't argue with that. Across the room, Maya Williams sat at the long conference table reviewing a printed list Marcus had given her earlier. It contained photographs of several men believed to be connected to Victor Hale's operations. She studied the faces carefully. Most of them looked ordinary. That was the unsettling part. None of them looked like criminals. They looked like mechanics, delivery drivers, construction workers, men who could stand on a street corner without anyone noticing them. Marcus noticed her expression. You recognize anyone? He asked. Maya shook her head slowly. No. She placed the papers down. My brother never talked about names. That's normal, Marcus said. People like Hale don't share details. Daniel walked over to the table. Your brother mentioned 3 men chasing you last night. Yes. Marcus tapped the screen. Our cameras caught them briefly. He zoomed in on the image. 3 blurred figures appeared at the far end of the street from the previous night's footage. Maya leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That one, she said quietly. Marcus looked. Which one? The man in the dark jacket. Marcus enhanced the frame. Why him? Maya hesitated. I heard my brother say the name Victor's driver once. Marcus glanced at Daniel. That could be important. Daniel studied the screen carefully. If Hale's driver was there last night, Marcus finished the thought. Then Hale may be closer to this than we thought. The study door opened quietly. Mrs. Jenkins stepped inside, carrying a small tray with fresh coffee. Mr. Whitmore, she said softly. Daniel turned. Yes, Mrs. Jenkins, you have a call from Mr. Bennett. Daniel frowned slightly. Transfer it here. Mrs. Jenkins nodded and left. Marcus looked at Daniel. Bennett is one of your foundation board members. Yes. The phone on the desk rang once. Daniel answered it calmly. Bennett. A voice crackled through the speaker. Daniel, sorry to bother you this morning. You're not bothering me. I just wanted to confirm tonight's meeting. It's still scheduled. A pause followed. Good, Bennett said. Some of the donors were worried about the weather last night. Daniel glanced briefly toward Marcus and Maya. The weather will not affect tonight's event. Excellent, Bennett replied. Another pause. Then Bennett added something that made Marcus look up. By the way, Daniel, a man called the office earlier asking about your schedule. Daniel's voice remained calm. Did he give a name? No. What did he want? He asked whether you'd still be leaving the building around 8:15. The room became very quiet. Marcus slowly turned toward the security screen. And what did you tell him? Daniel asked. I told him your schedule was unchanged. Daniel nodded once. That was the correct answer. Everything all right? Bennett asked. Yes, Daniel said smoothly. Just routine questions. He ended the call. Marcus spoke immediately. That's our insider. Daniel shook his head slightly. Not necessarily. Marcus frowned. You think Bennett made the call? No. Daniel looked toward the security screen. But whoever called Bennett now believes the schedule is confirmed. Maya felt a chill run through her. They're preparing. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes. He turned toward Daniel. They'll move tonight. Detective Pierce's voice suddenly came through the speaker system again. I heard that, he said. Marcus smiled faintly. You've been listening. Of course, Pierce replied. This is getting interesting. Marcus crossed his arms. So what's your update? Pierce answered quickly. We've got an unmarked surveillance team 2 blocks from the Foundation building. Good. But there's something else, Pierce added. What? Daniel asked. We tracked the shell companies connected to those vehicles. Marcus leaned forward. And? They all lead back to a warehouse near the Brooklyn waterfront. Daniel remained silent. Pierce continued. That's where Hale keeps most of his operations. Marcus nodded slowly. So tonight's crew may come from there. That's our guess. Daniel looked toward the large map on the wall again. Then he spoke quietly. Have a team watch that warehouse. Already done, Pierce said. Marcus turned toward Maya. You hear that? Maya nodded. Everything she had warned them about was starting to connect. Daniel walked back toward the window. The sky outside had darkened again. Clouds were rolling in from the river. Tonight, he said calmly. Hale believes he's about to win. Marcus gave a short laugh. Bad assumption. Pierce's voice returned through the speaker. Let him believe it. Maya looked from one man to another. She had grown up in a world where powerful men made decisions behind closed doors while ordinary people simply survived the consequences. But now she was watching something different. These men were preparing for a fight. A quiet one. A precise one. Marcus checked the clock on the wall. 11:42. Less than 8 hours until the Foundation meeting. He looked at Daniel. Still plenty of time to change your mind. Daniel Whitmore's voice remained steady. No. Marcus smiled faintly. Didn't think so. Daniel turned back toward the screen. Tonight, he said quietly, Victor Hale will learn something important. Maya looked at him. What? Daniel Whitmore's expression didn't change. That kidnapping a man who already knows you're coming, he paused, is a very dangerous mistake. The afternoon passed slowly, but inside Daniel Whitmore's townhouse, every hour felt heavier than the one before. Outside, Manhattan continued moving as it always did. Traffic built along Lexington Avenue. Pedestrians hurried between buildings with coffee cups and briefcases. And the gray clouds above the city thickened, as if the sky itself were preparing for something. Inside the study, the large display screen now showed 2 separate locations. One camera feed came from the Whitmore Foundation building. The other showed the Brooklyn warehouse Detective Pierce had mentioned earlier. Marcus Reed stood beside the screen with a tablet in his hands, tracking small movements across the live feeds. Pierce just updated, Marcus said. Daniel looked up from the desk. What did he find? Marcus zoomed in on the warehouse camera. 2 vans arrived about 20 minutes ago. The grainy image showed a rusted loading dock beside the river. A gray van had backed into the building while another sat parked near a chain-link fence. Daniel studied the screen carefully. People? 5 men visible so far, Marcus replied. Armed? Hard to tell. Across the room, Maya Williams felt the tension grow thicker. Every new detail felt like another piece of the same dangerous puzzle. Do you think my brother is there? She asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. It's possible. Daniel turned toward her. Your brother would not lead an operation like this. Maya looked confused. How do you know? Because Victor Hale doesn't trust desperate people with important jobs, Daniel said calmly. Marcus nodded. Hale hires professionals for things like kidnapping. Maya lowered her eyes. That meant something else. My father might still be involved, she said. Marcus gave her a careful look. Maybe. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the security map again. What about the foundation building? Marcus tapped the screen. The camera feed shifted. The glass entrance of the Whitmore Foundation office appeared, with several staff members moving in and out as they prepared for the evening donor event. Everything normal so far, Marcus said. No unusual visitors. Maya leaned forward slightly. What about the insider? Marcus zoomed in on a list of employee names connected to the building's internal network. We're monitoring calls leaving the office, he said. Nothing suspicious yet. Daniel folded his hands behind his back. That will change. Maya watched him. You're certain? Yes. Why? Daniel answered simply. Because whoever called Bennett this morning will want confirmation before the job begins. Marcus added. And criminals rarely trust silence. Just then the phone on the desk vibrated. Marcus picked it up. Pierce again. He answered on speaker. Go ahead. Detective Pierce's voice came through clearly. We've got movement at the warehouse. Marcus straightened. What kind of movement? 3 more vehicles just arrived, Pierce said. Black SUV, white cargo van, and a sedan. Marcus glanced at Daniel. That's a full crew, Pierce continued. And something else. What? They're loading equipment. Daniel stepped closer to the speaker. What kind of equipment? Pierce hesitated slightly. Restraints. The word landed heavily in the room. Marcus muttered under his breath. That confirms it. Maya felt her stomach tighten. They're serious. Daniel's expression didn't change. Yes, Pierce continued. My team is keeping distance, but it looks like they're preparing to move within the hour. Marcus looked at the clock. 3:15. That lines up with the meeting schedule, he said. Pierce's voice lowered slightly. There's more. Daniel waited. One of the men entering the warehouse matches the image your cameras caught last night. Marcus looked toward Maya, the driver. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, Pierce continued. If he's involved, Hale's inner circle is running this operation. Marcus folded his arms. Then tonight really is the main event. Daniel walked back toward the desk. Keep watching the warehouse. Pierce replied. Already doing that. Marcus ended the call. The room fell quiet again. Maya looked at Daniel. What happens if they succeed? Marcus answered before Daniel could speak. They won't. But if they did? Maya insisted. Daniel turned toward her calmly. Then they would discover something very disappointing. Maya didn't understand. Marcus did. He means kidnapping him wouldn't give them what they want. Daniel added quietly. Victor Hale believes power comes from fear. Maya listened carefully. But fear works both ways. Marcus smiled faintly. That's true. Across the room, one of the security men approached Marcus. Sir. Marcus turned. What is it? Movement at the foundation building. Marcus quickly pulled the camera feed onto the main screen. A man was stepping out of the office lobby, looking around carefully before walking toward the corner of the street. Marcus zoomed in. The man pulled a phone from his pocket. Daniel watched silently. Maya leaned forward. Is that someone who works there? Marcus checked the staff list. Yes. Name. Richard Nolan. Daniel's voice remained steady. Position? Marcus scanned the file. Assistant Logistics Coordinator. Maya whispered softly. That sounds like someone who knows schedules. Marcus nodded slowly. Exactly. On the screen, Nolan spoke briefly into his phone, then ended the call and returned inside the building. Marcus exhaled. Well, Daniel looked at the clock. 3:27. Pierce, Marcus said while dialing again. The detective answered immediately. You saw the call? Marcus asked. Yes, Pierce replied. We're tracking the number now. Daniel asked quietly. Where did it connect? Pierce answered a few seconds later. The Brooklyn warehouse. Maya felt the truth settle like ice in her chest. The insider. Marcus looked at Daniel. That confirms everything. Daniel Whitmore stood quietly for a moment. Then he said only one sentence. Tonight proceeds exactly as planned. Maya looked at him. You're really going to face them? Daniel met her gaze. Yes. Marcus checked the time again. 3:30. Less than 5 hours until the meeting. He looked at the security team around the room. Everyone get ready. The atmosphere inside the study shifted instantly. Men moved with new urgency. Phones rang. Vehicles were reassigned. Outside, the sky darkened further as the winter afternoon slowly turned toward evening. Daniel Whitmore stood near the window watching the city. Maya stepped beside him. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Daniel looked at the street below. No. She studied him carefully. Why not? Daniel Whitmore answered in the same calm tone he had used all day. Because Victor Hale believes tonight belongs to him. Maya waited. Daniel added one final sentence. And people who believe that too strongly, he looked back toward the security screens, usually make very serious mistakes. By early evening, the city lights of Manhattan had begun to glow against the darkening sky. Snow that had fallen during the night had mostly melted, leaving wet reflections across the pavement and the glass walls of the surrounding buildings. From the outside, the Whitmore Foundation headquarters looked exactly as it always did. Quiet, professional, and welcoming to the donors and board members who were already beginning to arrive for the evening event. Inside Daniel Whitmore's townhouse, however, the atmosphere had sharpened into something much more focused. The final preparations were underway. Marcus Reed stood beside the long conference table reviewing the last security briefing with the team. 2 additional guards had arrived from the private firm that handled most of Whitmore's off-site protection, and both were now listening carefully as Marcus explained the plan one final time. "Nothing changes," Marcus said. He pointed toward the screen displaying the foundation building. "Mr. Whitmore arrives at 6:45. One guard nodded and wrote something down. "The event begins at 7, Marcus continued. "Guests enter through the main lobby. Security checks stay normal," another guard asked quietly. "And the exit?" Marcus glanced briefly toward Daniel. 8:15. The room remained silent for a moment. Everyone there understood what that meant. That was when Victor Hale's crew believed they would strike. Across the room, Maya Williams sat near the window watching the preparations. She had spent most of the afternoon observing the way these men worked together quietly, professionally, without the panic she might have expected. But now that evening had arrived, the reality of what was about to happen felt heavier than ever. Marcus noticed her watching. "You all right?" he asked. Maya nodded slowly. "I think so." Marcus gave a small shrug. "That's more than most people feel before something like this." She looked toward Daniel. He stood near the door adjusting the cuff of his dark coat, looking exactly like a man preparing for an ordinary evening meeting. "You really look calm," Maya said quietly. Daniel glanced toward her. "I am calm." She hesitated. "How?" Daniel answered simply. "Preparation removes most fear." Marcus chuckled softly. "Experience helps too." Just then the phone on the table vibrated again. Marcus answered immediately. "Pierce." The detective's voice came through clearly. "They're moving." The room went still. "How many vehicles?" Marcus asked. 3 left the warehouse 10 minutes ago." Marcus checked the screen. "Direction? Toward Manhattan." Daniel stepped closer. "Estimated arrival?" Pierce answered. 40 minutes. Marcus looked at the clock. 6:35. "That puts them near the foundation just after the event begins." Pierce continued. "My team will stay back until the attempt happens." Daniel nodded. "Understood." Marcus ended the call. For a moment no one spoke. Then Daniel said quietly, "Time to leave." The team moved immediately. Marcus grabbed the keys for the black town car waiting outside, while 2 additional guards headed toward the secondary vehicle that would follow them at a distance. Maya stood. "You're really going now?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." She stepped closer. "I want to come." Marcus reacted instantly. "No." Maya looked at him. "I need to see what happens." Marcus shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not." Daniel studied her for a moment. "You've done enough already." "But my father made his choices," Daniel said calmly. Maya fell silent. Daniel's voice softened slightly. "You're safer here." Mrs. Jenkins appeared quietly beside the staircase. "Miss Williams can stay upstairs," she said. "I'll be here with her." Marcus opened the door. Cold evening air slipped into the hallway. Daniel paused before stepping outside. He looked back toward Maya. "If everything goes as expected," he said, "this will be over tonight." Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed that yet. Outside, the black town car waited at the curb, its engine already running. Marcus took the driver's seat while Daniel entered the back. The 2 security vehicles followed seconds later. Inside the car, Marcus adjusted the mirror. "You comfortable back there?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Marcus pulled away from the townhouse smoothly, merging into the evening traffic. Manhattan moved around them like it always did. Bright storefronts, crowded sidewalks, taxis honking in the distance. But Marcus knew something the rest of the city didn't. Somewhere behind them, Victor Hale's crew was also moving toward the same destination. Marcus spoke quietly into the radio. "Team 1, status," a voice replied. "2 blocks behind you." "Good." Daniel looked out the window. The city lights reflected across the glass as they approached the Whitmore Foundation building. Marcus slowed the car slightly. There it is. The Foundation headquarters rose ahead of them, a modern glass structure glowing warmly under the evening lights. Guests were already entering the lobby. Valet attendants moved between vehicles. Everything looked completely normal. Marcus parked in the usual drop-off position. He stepped out first and opened Daniel's door. "Showtime," Marcus said quietly. Daniel stepped onto the sidewalk. Across the street, unnoticed by most of the guests arriving for the event, a dark SUV rolled slowly past the building. Inside that SUV, men were watching, waiting. Inside the Foundation lobby, staff members greeted donors with polite smiles. Music from a small jazz trio floated through the air. To everyone inside the building, it was just another charity evening, but Daniel Whitmore knew something none of them did. Tonight, someone intended to take him. Marcus walked beside him toward the entrance. "You think they're already here?" Marcus asked quietly. Daniel glanced briefly toward the street. "Yes." Marcus nodded once. "Good." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why good?" Marcus gave a thin smile. "Because it means the trap is already working." Inside the building, the evening event began exactly on schedule. But outside, in the shadows between the streetlights and parked cars, the men Victor Hale had sent were slowly taking their positions, and none of them yet realized that Daniel Whitmore had been expecting them all along. Inside the Whitmore Foundation building, the evening event unfolded exactly as it had dozens of times before. Warm lights reflected across polished floors. Waiters moved between small groups of donors carrying trays of wine and appetizers. The quiet music of the jazz trio near the far wall created an atmosphere that felt relaxed, almost celebratory. No one in the room suspected that several blocks away, a team of men had already arrived with restraints in the back of a van. Daniel Whitmore walked calmly through the lobby beside Marcus Reed. Several board members greeted him immediately. "Daniel, good to see you," one of them said warmly. Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you for coming." Another donor shook his hand. "Always a pleasure to support the foundation." Daniel moved easily through the room, speaking briefly with each guest, his expression composed and professional. To anyone watching, he looked like a man completely focused on the success of the evening. Marcus remained only a few steps away the entire time. His attention was not on the donors. His eyes moved constantly toward the entrances, the windows, the staff, and the reflection of the street outside. Into the small microphone hidden beneath his collar, he spoke quietly. "Team 1. A voice answered through the earpiece. "In position." Marcus glanced toward the glass doors at the front entrance. "Team 2. Service alley covered." Marcus nodded faintly. Daniel continued greeting guests. Across the lobby, Richard Nolan stood near the refreshments table pretending to review a clipboard, but his eyes kept drifting toward Daniel Whitmore. Every few seconds, Marcus noticed immediately. He leaned slightly toward Daniel. "Your insider is nervous." Daniel followed Marcus's gaze. Richard Nolan quickly looked away. Daniel's voice remained calm. "Fear usually reveals loyalty," Marcus murmured quietly. "Or guilt." Outside, the dark SUV rolled slowly past the building again before turning the corner. Inside the vehicle, two men watched the foundation entrance carefully. One of them spoke into a small radio. "Target confirmed." A second voice replied, "Hold position." The man in the passenger seat glanced toward the foundation entrance again. "Looks normal." "Good," the radio answered. "Wait for the exit." Back inside the building, Detective Pierce stood across the street pretending to read something on his phone. An unmarked sedan waited nearby with two additional officers inside. Pierce spoke quietly into his microphone. "Vehicles confirmed," he said. "Two SUVs and a van." Marcus's voice returned through the earpiece. "Same plates from the warehouse?" "Same ones." Pierce exhaled slowly. "Looks like Hale sent the full crew." Marcus glanced at Daniel again. "He's here," Marcus whispered. Daniel nodded slightly. "Good." The event continued. At 7:30, Daniel stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room to give the evening's scheduled remarks. The donors applauded politely. Daniel stood behind the podium. He spoke about education programs the foundation supported, about scholarships for underprivileged students, and about the importance of community responsibility. The speech lasted exactly 10 minutes. As he spoke, Marcus stood near the edge of the room watching every face carefully. Richard Nolan stood near the back, and during the speech, Nolan quietly slipped his phone from his pocket. Marcus noticed the movement immediately. "Pierce," he murmured. "Your man is making another call." Across the street, Pierce lifted his eyes from his phone. "I see him." Inside the foundation hall, Nolan turned slightly away from the crowd and spoke quickly into the phone. "Yes." A pause. "He's here." Another pause. 8:15. Same exit. Nolan ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Marcus's voice came quietly through Pierce's earpiece. "That confirms it." Pierce nodded. "They're moving soon." Back inside, Daniel finished his speech. The audience applauded. He stepped down from the stage and returned to the crowd as if nothing unusual had happened. Marcus leaned closer to him. "Your friend just confirmed the schedule." Daniel gave a faint nod. "Good." "What now?" Marcus asked. Daniel checked his watch. 7:45. "Now we wait." Outside the building, the dark SUV parked 2 blocks away. Inside the vehicle, the driver checked his watch. 30 minutes. The man beside him nodded. "The van is ready." "Good." A third voice came through the radio. "Remember, grab the target fast. No shooting unless necessary." The driver smiled slightly. "Relax." He looked toward the glowing foundation building in the distance. "This will be easy." Back inside the event hall, Marcus watched the clock. 8 o'clock. Guests continued talking, laughing softly, enjoying the evening. None of them knew the next 15 minutes could turn violent. Marcus spoke quietly again. "All teams ready." The responses came one after another. "Team 1 ready." "Team 2 ready." "Pierce ready." Daniel stood near the window speaking politely with one of the donors, but his eyes occasionally shifted toward the street. 8, 10. Marcus moved closer. 5 minutes. Daniel nodded. Across the room, Richard Nolan had begun watching the exit doors. His breathing had grown slightly faster. He believed everything was about to happen exactly the way Victor Hale planned. Outside, the van's engine started. The driver glanced toward the foundation entrance. "Positions." Inside the hall, Marcus touched the small radio again. "All units stay calm." Daniel adjusted the sleeve of his coat. To everyone else, he looked like a man preparing to leave after a successful evening event. But Marcus knew better. They had reached the moment the entire day had been building toward. Marcus checked the time. 8:14. He looked at Daniel. "Ready?" Daniel Whitmore answered in the same calm voice he had used all day. "Yes." Then he added one final sentence. "Let's see who makes the first mistake." The clock on the wall behind the reception desk quietly changed from 8:14 to 8:15. Inside the Whitmore Foundation Hall, most of the guests barely noticed. Laughter still floated through the room. Waiters continued carrying trays of wine. The jazz trio had begun another slow tune near the far wall. But for the small group of people who knew what was about to happen, the next few seconds stretched into something heavy and precise. Marcus Reed touched the small microphone beneath his collar. "Stand by." Daniel Whitmore finished his conversation with one of the donors and turned calmly toward the exit. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I have an early morning tomorrow." The donor nodded with a smile. "Of course, Daniel. Wonderful event tonight." Daniel thanked him and began walking toward the glass doors at the front of the building. Marcus stayed one step behind. Across the room, Richard Nolan pretended to check a clipboard, but his eyes followed Daniel's movement closely. His fingers tightened around the phone in his pocket. Outside, the dark SUV's engine was already running. Inside the vehicle, the driver leaned forward slightly as he saw movement through the foundation's glass doors. "That's him." The man in the passenger seat grabbed the radio. "Target moving." A third voice answered immediately. "Van ready." The driver smiled faintly. "Let's do it." Inside the lobby, Daniel pushed the glass door open. Cold evening air rushed inside. Marcus stepped out first, scanning the street automatically. The sidewalk looked normal. Cars passed slowly. Pedestrians moved along the opposite side of the street. Nothing appeared unusual. Marcus opened the rear door of the black town car waiting at the curb. "Your ride." Daniel stepped toward the car. And that was the moment everything changed. From the corner of the street, the white cargo van suddenly accelerated. Its tires screeched as it cut across the lane and stopped hard in front of the town car. The rear doors flew open. 3 men jumped out. Each of them moved with fast, practiced precision. One aimed a handgun toward Marcus. "Don't move." Another rushed toward Daniel. "Get in the van." Inside the foundation lobby, several guests screamed. Glass rattled as people stepped back in confusion. Marcus reacted instantly. He stepped between Daniel and the approaching men. "Wrong move," Marcus said quietly. The man with the gun hesitated for a fraction of a second. That hesitation was enough. From the opposite side of the street, two unmarked police vehicles surged forward with flashing lights. "Police, drop your weapons!" Detective Pierce's voice cut through the air. The kidnappers froze. For 1 second, then chaos exploded. The man with the handgun fired a single shot. The bullet shattered the front window of the town car. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing the gunman's arm and twisting it violently. The weapon clattered to the pavement. Another kidnapper tried to drag Daniel toward the van, but Daniel didn't move. Instead, Marcus's second security guard slammed into the attacker from the side, knocking him hard against the vehicle. Across the street, police officers poured out of the unmarked cars. "Hands up!" The driver of the van panicked. He jumped into the front seat and slammed the door. The engine roared, but before he could move, a police cruiser blocked the road ahead. The driver slammed his fist against the steering wheel. Damn it. Outside the foundation doors, donors and staff had retreated inside the lobby, watching in shock through the glass. Marcus forced the first gunman onto the pavement and pinned his arm behind his back. "You picked the wrong billionaire tonight," Marcus muttered. The second attacker struggled violently as two officers grabbed him. "Let go." A third man tried to run. He made it 10 feet before Detective Pierce tackled him to the ground. Within seconds, the entire scene had changed. Sirens echoed across the street. Police surrounded the van, and the kidnapping attempt collapsed before it had truly begun. Marcus stood up slowly. He glanced toward Daniel. "You all right?" Daniel brushed a small piece of broken glass from his coat. "Yes." Pierce walked toward them while two officers cuffed the attackers. "Well," Pierce said, slightly out of breath. "That was faster than expected." Marcus nodded. "They panicked." Pierce looked toward the van. 3 in custody." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Only 3? Pierce followed his gaze. The driver's seat of the van was empty. The door hung open. Pierce cursed under his breath. He ran. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Pierce looked toward the dark street beyond the police lights. "Somewhere in Manhattan." Daniel watched quietly as officers secured the prisoners. "Victor Hale's driver," Daniel said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes." Pierce turned toward Daniel. "That man knows this operation failed." Daniel looked toward the empty street where the driver had disappeared. "Yes," Pierce exhaled, "which means Hale will know soon too." Marcus folded his arms. "Good." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Why good?" Marcus gave a faint smile. "Because now he knows we're coming." Daniel Whitmore said nothing for a moment. The flashing lights reflected across the wet pavement. Police officers moved around the captured kidnappers. Inside the foundation building, the guests were still watching in stunned silence. Finally, Daniel spoke quietly. "This wasn't the end." Pierce nodded. "No." Marcus looked toward the empty street again. "This was just the first mistake." Daniel Whitmore turned toward the building entrance. "And Victor Hale is about to make another one." The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars painted the front of the Whitmore Foundation building in shifting colors. Across the wet pavement, officers continued securing the 3 men who had attempted the kidnapping. One of them sat on the curb with his hands cuffed behind his back, breathing hard. Another leaned against the police cruiser while an officer searched his pockets. Inside the foundation lobby, donors and staff still stood behind the glass doors, whispering in disbelief about what they had just witnessed. Daniel Whitmore remained calm in the middle of it all. Marcus Reed stood beside him, scanning the street again. The van driver had disappeared into the city. Detective Pierce walked back from speaking with the arresting officers. "Well," Pierce said, brushing rainwater from his coat sleeve. "That was dramatic." Marcus nodded toward the empty driver's seat of the van. "You lost one." Pierce sighed. "Yeah." Daniel spoke quietly. "That man will report to Victor Hale." Pierce nodded, which means Hale already knows the kidnapping failed. Marcus crossed his arms. "And now he's angry." Pierce gave a faint smile. That's usually when criminals make their worst decisions. Behind them, the foundation doors opened and several security staff stepped outside cautiously. One of the board members approached Daniel. "Daniel, are you all right?" the man asked. "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "Everything is under control." The board member looked at the handcuffed men near the police cars. That didn't look very controlled. Marcus stepped forward politely. "Sir, it would be best if the guests remain inside for a few more minutes." The man nodded quickly and returned to the building. Pierce watched the exchange. "You handle chaos well," he said. Daniel's expression didn't change. Preparation helps. An officer approached Pierce. We searched the van. Pierce turned. What did you find? Zip ties, restraints, 2 radios, and a second handgun under the seat. Marcus shook his head. They were serious. Pierce looked at the arrested men. Yes. Daniel asked quietly. Any identification? Fake licenses, the officer replied. Pierce sighed. Hale's usual method. Marcus glanced down the street again. The driver will reach Hale soon. Pierce nodded. Which means Hale now has 2 choices. Daniel looked at him. Explain. Pierce raised 2 fingers. Option 1, he disappears. Marcus snorted. Cowards do that. Pierce lowered 1 finger. Option 2, he reacts. Daniel's voice remained calm. And reaction usually means escalation. Pierce nodded. Yes. Marcus looked toward the captured kidnappers. What about them? Pierce turned toward the men sitting on the curb. We take them in, Daniel said quietly. They won't talk. Pierce smiled slightly. You'd be surprised. Marcus tilted his head. Hale's people are loyal. Pierce shrugged. They're loyal until they realize Hale isn't coming to rescue them. The officers finished loading the prisoners into the back of a police vehicle. The street began to calm again as flashing lights dimmed and several patrol cars slowly drove away. Pierce stepped closer to Daniel. I'd like to ask Miss Williams something, he said. Daniel nodded. She's at the townhouse. Good. Pierce looked toward Marcus. You driving him back? Marcus nodded. Immediately. Pierce checked his watch. 9 o'clock. Marcus opened the car door again. Let's move. Daniel paused for a moment before entering the vehicle. He looked once more at the van. Victor Hale will not let this end quietly, he said. Pierce agreed. No. Marcus slid into the driver's seat. The engine started. As the town car pulled away from the foundation building, the city lights of Manhattan reflected across the windshield. For several blocks, no one spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. That could have gone worse. Daniel looked out the window. Yes, Marcus continued. But Hale lost his crew tonight. Daniel shook his head slightly. No. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? Daniel answered quietly. Hale lost a tool. Marcus glanced at him through the mirror. You think he has more? Yes. Marcus Sehill. That man must really hate you. Daniel's voice remained calm. This isn't about hate. Then what? Control. Marcus drove for another block before speaking again. So what happens now? Daniel turned his eyes back toward the city streets. Now Victor Hale learns the plan failed. Marcus nodded. And he decides whether to retreat. Daniel paused. Or try something worse. Meanwhile, back at the townhouse, Maya Williams stood near the window watching the quiet street. Mrs. Jenkins sat nearby with a cup of tea. You should sit, the older woman said gently. Maya shook her head. I can't. She checked the clock again. 9:10. Her stomach tightened with every passing minute. She had warned them. She had seen the plan unfold. But until Daniel Whitmore walked back through the door safely, her mind refused to relax. Suddenly, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A black town car turned the corner. Maya stepped closer to the window. That's him, she whispered. The car stopped in front of the townhouse. Marcus stepped out first. Then Daniel. Maya exhaled for the first time in several minutes. Inside the car, Marcus closed the door behind them and looked toward Daniel. Well, he said quietly, you survived. Daniel removed his coat slowly. That was only the first part. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? Daniel looked toward the dark street outside. The driver escaped. Marcus nodded. Yes. Daniel's voice remained calm. And men like Victor Hale don't forgive failure. Marcus leaned back in the seat. So what you're saying, Daniel finished the thought, is that tonight may not be over yet. The townhouse door closed quietly behind Daniel Whitmore. Outside, the street had returned to its usual Manhattan calm, wet pavement reflecting streetlights. Distant traffic humming somewhere beyond the quiet residential block. Inside, however, the tension from the evening had not disappeared. Marcus Reed locked the door and turned toward Daniel. You sure you're all right? Daniel removed his coat slowly. Yes. Marcus studied him for a moment. You don't even look shaken. Daniel gave a small shrug. Shaking would not improve the situation. Before Marcus could answer, footsteps approached from the staircase. Maya Williams appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She had clearly been waiting. Did it happen? She asked. Marcus gave a short smile. Oh, it happened. Maya stepped closer. And? Daniel answered calmly. They tried. Her eyes widened slightly. Are you hurt? No. Marcus gestured toward the living room. 3 of them are now sitting in the back of a police car. Maya exhaled slowly. Then it's over. Daniel did not respond. Marcus noticed immediately. Tell her. Maya looked between them. What? Marcus spoke carefully. One of them got away. The relief in Maya's expression faded instantly. The driver? Yes, Marcus said. Maya's shoulders tightened. He'll go back to Hale. Daniel nodded. Yes. Maya lowered her eyes. That means Hale knows I warned you. Daniel stepped toward the fireplace. He likely suspected that already. Marcus leaned against the wall. But now he knows for certain. Maya sat slowly in the chair beside the window. What happens now? Daniel answered without hesitation. Hale will respond. Marcus crossed his arms. He won't take losing a kidnapping crew lightly. Maya whispered quietly. My father. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at her carefully. Your father worked with Hale. Yes. He owes him money. Yes. Marcus hesitated. Then your father may already be in trouble. Maya's voice trembled slightly. I didn't want this to happen. Daniel looked at her. Your father made his choices. Maya didn't answer. Mrs. Jenkins entered quietly, carrying another tray of coffee. Mr. Whitmore, she said softly. Detective Pierce is on the phone. Marcus nodded. Put him on speaker. Mrs. Jenkins placed the phone on the table. Pierce's voice filled the room. I figured you'd be home by now. Marcus replied. Just arrived. Pierce sighed. Well, we've got updates. Daniel waited. Pierce continued. We questioned the 3 men we arrested. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Adrenaline makes people talk, Pierce replied. Did they say anything useful? Daniel asked. Yes. Pierce paused briefly. They confirmed Victor Hale ordered the kidnapping personally. Marcus nodded. No surprise. Pierce continued. They also confirmed something else. Daniel spoke quietly. What? There was a second plan. The room went still. Marcus straightened. Explain. Pierce's voice lowered. If the kidnapping failed, he paused. Hale planned to eliminate the problem. Maya felt a chill run through her. What problem? Pierce answered. Daniel Whitmore. Marcus muttered under his breath. That's escalation. Daniel remained calm. Pierce continued. The men we arrested weren't part of that second plan. Marcus frowned. Then who is? Pierce answered slowly. Hale's inner circle. Daniel looked toward the dark window. How many? We don't know, Pierce said. But we believe the man who escaped tonight is one of them. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. So he reports back. And Hale sends someone else. Pierce finished. Maya whispered softly. When? Pierce didn't hesitate. Soon. Marcus looked toward Daniel. You hear that? Yes. Marcus shook his head slightly. You attract a lot of trouble. Daniel didn't react. Instead, he asked Pierce one question. Where is Victor Hale right now? Pierce hid. That's the problem. What problem? We lost track of him this afternoon. Marcus's expression hardened. You mean he's already moving? Pierce answered quietly. That's exactly what I mean. Maya felt the weight of those words settle in the room. Her father's debt, her brother's plan, the kidnapping attempt, and now something worse. Daniel Whitmore finally spoke again. Pierce. Yes. Place surveillance on every property connected to Hale. Already started. Marcus stepped toward the window. The street outside remained empty. What about us? He asked. Pierce answered. You stay inside tonight. Marcus looked toward Daniel. That a good idea? Daniel's voice remained calm. Yes. Marcus frowned slightly. You think Hale might try something here? Daniel nodded. It would be logical. Maya's heart began beating faster. You mean he might come here? Daniel looked at her. Yes. Marcus checked the security monitors near the door. All cameras active. Pierce's voice came through the speaker again. Daniel. Yes. You should understand something. What? Pierce spoke slowly. Victor Hale has lost money, men, and control tonight. Marcus muttered quietly. That's a bad combination. Pierce agreed. Yes. Daniel stood beside the window watching the quiet street. What are you suggesting? Pierce answered. I'm suggesting that men like Hale do not walk away quietly. Marcus folded his arms. They retaliate. Pierce said one final sentence. And I believe Victor Hale is preparing to do exactly that. The house grew quieter after Detective Pierce ended the call. Outside, Manhattan had slipped deeper into the night. The traffic along the nearby avenues had thinned. and the wet pavement reflected long streaks of yellow streetlight. From the windows of Daniel Whitmore's townhouse, the city looked calm again. Inside the living room, however, no one felt calm. Marcus Reed stood beside the wall monitor studying the security cameras that covered the entire block. "Front Street clear," he muttered. Daniel Whitmore remained near the fireplace, his hands resting lightly on the back of the chair. His expression looked exactly the same as it had all evening, controlled, thoughtful, almost detached. Maya Williams sat quietly near the window. Her mind kept replaying Pierce's words. Victor Hale had lost control, and men like that did not forgive humiliation. Marcus finally broke the silence. "You think Pierce is right?" Daniel looked at him. "Yes." Marcus Sehill. "So Hale sends someone tonight. That would be the logical response." Marcus crossed his arms. "Well, at least we're ready." Daniel nodded slightly. The house security system had been reinforced earlier that afternoon. Cameras covered every approach to the building. Motion sensors guarded the back courtyard. 2 additional guards from Marcus's firm were positioned outside in an unmarked vehicle at the end of the street. Still, something about the situation unsettled Marcus. Kidnapping attempts were one thing. Desperate criminals were another. Maya finally spoke. "If Hale comes here, it will be because of me." Daniel turned toward her. "No." Maya shook her head. "I exposed the plan." "Yes," Daniel said calmly. "But Hale did not lose because of you." Marcus added quietly. "He lost because he underestimated the situation." Maya looked down at her hands. "My father warned me about men like Hale." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Your father?" Maya nodded. "He said Hale was patient." Marcus gave a short laugh. "Not tonight." Maya's voice remained quiet. "That's what worries me." The security monitor on the wall flickered as one of the outside cameras adjusted automatically. Marcus glanced up. Just a taxi passing. Daniel walked toward the window and looked out at the street. Nothing unusual. No suspicious movement. The quiet almost felt unnatural. Marcus checked the clock. On IK p.m. Pierce should have patrol units nearby by now. As if on cue, the phone on the table vibrated again. Marcus answered immediately. "Pierce." The detective's voice sounded tighter than before. "We've got movement." Marcus straightened. "Where?" "The Brooklyn warehouse." Daniel turned toward the phone. "Explain." Pierce continued. "One vehicle just left the warehouse about 5 minutes ago." Marcus asked quickly. "Type?" "Black sedan." Daniel asked quietly. "Direction?" Pierce hesitated. "That's the problem." "What problem?" Marcus asked. "The car turned off its tracking route." Marcus frowned. "You lost it." "Yes." Silence settled briefly. Daniel spoke calmly. "Which means Hale does not want to be followed." Pierce agreed. "That's my guess." Marcus leaned against the table. "So the question is, where is it going?" Pierce didn't answer immediately. Then he said something that made the room colder. "We believe the sedan is heading toward Manhattan." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Well, that narrows it down." Daniel asked one more question. "Who is driving?" Pierce answered quietly. "We believe it's Victor Hale himself." Maya's breath caught. "You're sure?" "As sure as we can be," Pierce replied. Marcus muttered under his breath. "That's bold." Daniel's expression didn't change. "No." Marcus looked at him. "What do you mean?" Daniel answered calmly. "Hale is not coming here to talk." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then he's coming to finish the problem," Pierce said quietly through the phone. "My units are moving to intercept." Daniel responded immediately. "No." Pierce paused. "Why not?" "Because Hale will expect that." Marcus glanced at Daniel. "You want to let him come here?" Daniel's voice remained steady. "Yes." Pierce sighed. "That's risky." Marcus gave a faint smile. "That's Daniel." Maya felt the tension tighten in her chest. "You're letting him come here?" Daniel looked at her. "I am allowing him to reveal himself." Marcus checked the monitors again. "If Hale shows up." Daniel finished the thought. "Then tonight ends." Marcus studied Daniel's face. "You sound confident." Daniel looked toward the quiet street outside. "Confidence is unnecessary." Marcus frowned slightly. "Then what is it?" Daniel answered in the same calm tone he had used all evening. "Preparation." The room fell silent again. Outside, a light wind moved down the empty street. Far away, the distant sound of a siren echoed somewhere across the city. Marcus checked the time again. "Ombeer p.m., he muttered quietly. "If Hale really is driving toward Manhattan, Maya looked toward the window. The street remained empty, but the feeling in the room had changed. Everyone could feel it. Something was moving toward them. Daniel Whitmore remained perfectly still beside the window. Marcus glanced at him again. "You know something I don't?" Daniel shook his head. "No." Marcus waited. Then Daniel added quietly, "But men like Victor Hale only drive personally when they intend to end something." Maya whispered softly, "You mean tonight?" Daniel looked out at the dark street. "Yes." Marcus followed his gaze. The cameras showed nothing yet, but the night suddenly felt much less quiet. Daniel Whitmore spoke one final sentence, "And when Victor Hale arrives," he paused, "we will be ready." The silence inside Daniel Whitmore's townhouse grew heavier with every passing minute. Outside, the city had settled into the quiet rhythm of late evening. The sidewalks were mostly empty now, and only an occasional car passed through the intersection at the end of the block. Streetlights reflected across the wet pavement, turning the road into long ribbons of amber light. Inside the living room, the only sound came from the faint hum of the security monitors. Marcus Reed stood with his arms folded, watching the camera feeds one by one. Front street, rear alley, sidewalk, every angle looked clear. Still, the tension in the room had sharpened since Detective Pierce's last call. Maya Williams sat near the edge of the couch, her eyes moving between Daniel Whitmore and the screens. "You really think he's coming here?" she said quietly. Daniel did not turn from the window. "Yes." Marcus glanced toward him. "You sound very certain." Daniel replied calmly. "Hale has lost control of the situation." Marcus nodded slowly. "And men like that hate losing." Daniel added one more word, "especially publicly." Marcus looked down at his watch. "Ondocus p.m. Ningalden." "Pierce said the sedan left Brooklyn about 15 minutes ago," Marcus said. Daniel didn't respond. Marcus studied the street outside again through the monitor. "If Hale came directly across the bridge," he paused, "he should be somewhere in Manhattan already." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "What if he changes his mind?" Marcus shrugged slightly. "Possible." Daniel shook his head. "No." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Daniel answered simply. "Because Hale believes the problem is inside this house." Maya looked at him. "And that problem is you." Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Marcus muttered quietly. "Well, that's flattering." Suddenly one of the security monitors flickered. Marcus immediately stepped closer. "Wait." Daniel turned. "What is it?" Marcus zoomed in on the street camera. At the far end of the block, headlights had just appeared. A black sedan turned slowly onto the street. Marcus watched carefully. Single vehicle. The car moved slowly under the streetlights. No police lights. No escort. Just a quiet sedan approaching through the dark. Maya felt her heartbeat rise. "Is that him?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. The sedan continued down the block. Daniel stepped beside Marcus. Zoom. Marcus magnified the image. The license plate became visible. Marcus checked the data Pierce had sent earlier. Then he exhaled slowly. "That's the one," Maya whispered. "Victor Hale." Daniel's voice remained steady. "Yes." The sedan slowed further. It stopped halfway down the block. The engine continued running. Inside the car, the driver sat perfectly still. Marcus watched the screen. "He's not getting out." Daniel studied the image carefully. "He's thinking." Marcus crossed his arms. "About what?" Daniel answered quietly. "How to finish this." The sedan's door opened. A tall man stepped out. Even from the camera angle, the confidence in his movements was unmistakable. Victor Hale. He wore a long, dark coat and moved slowly toward the townhouse. Marcus muttered under his breath. "Well, that's bold." Maya stared at the screen. "That's him." Her voice carried a mixture of fear and recognition. Daniel watched Hale's approach calmly. "How far are the outside guards?" he asked. Marcus checked his phone. "End of the street, just like we planned." "Good." Hale continued walking. His steps were unhurried, almost casual. Marcus shook his head. "This guy either has a death wish," he paused, "or a lot of confidence." Daniel answered quietly. "Both." Maya whispered. "What is he going to do?" Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly toward the front door. Marcus turned sharply. "You're not serious." Daniel stopped beside the door. Marcus stepped forward. "You're not opening that." Daniel looked at him. "Yes." Marcus stared at him. "He's dangerous." "Yes." "He came here to kill you." "Possibly." Marcus ran a hand across his forehead. "Then why on earth would you open the door?" Daniel answered calmly. Because Victor Hale did not come here to shoot through a wall. Marcus frowned. He wants to talk. Yes. Maya stood suddenly. You can't trust him. Daniel turned toward her. I do not trust him. Then why? Because conversations reveal intentions. Marcus sealed heavily. You really do enjoy walking straight into trouble. Daniel gave the faintest hint of a smile. Only when the outcome is predictable. Outside, Victor Hale had reached the front steps. He stopped beneath the porch light. For a moment he simply looked at the door. Then he raised his hand and knocked. 3 calm knocks. Inside the house, the sound echoed softly through the hallway. Marcus shook his head. I hate this plan. Daniel reached for the door handle. Relax, Marcus muttered. That's easy for you to say. Daniel opened the door. Victor Hale stood on the steps, his expression composed, his eyes cold but curious. For a moment the two men simply looked at each other. Then Hale spoke. Well, he said quietly, I expected police. Daniel Whitmore answered in the same calm tone. You expected many things tonight. Hale gave a faint smile. Yes. He glanced past Daniel into the warm light of the house. And yet here you are. Daniel stepped slightly aside. You came all this way. Hale raised an eyebrow. Yes. Daniel's voice remained perfectly steady. Then we should talk. The street outside Daniel Whitmore's townhouse remained quiet, but the silence no longer felt peaceful. Inside the living room, every person present understood that the next few minutes could decide everything. Marcus Reed stood in front of the security monitor wall. The screens showed every angle of the block, the sidewalk, the alley beside the building, the parked cars, even the far corner where the street curved out of sight. Nothing moved, yet Marcus had worked security long enough to recognize the feeling that something was approaching. He checked the clock again. 11 p.m. Daniel Whitmore remained near the window, watching the dark street beyond the glass. His reflection floated faintly against the night, calm and motionless. Maya Williams sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. She had been silent for several minutes now, but her eyes kept drifting toward the security screens. Do you think he's close? She asked quietly. Marcus answered without looking away from some of the monitors. If Pierce is right, he's already in Manhattan. Daniel added calmly. Which means he's likely within a few blocks. Maya swallowed. The idea that Victor Hale himself might be driving toward them felt almost unreal. A man she had only heard about in whispers. A man who had controlled her father with debt and fear. Marcus suddenly leaned closer to one of the screens. Hold on. Daniel turned. What is it? Marcus tapped the monitor. The camera showing the far corner of the street had just captured something. Headlights. A black sedan slowly turning onto their block. Marcus zoomed the image. The vehicle moved cautiously. Its headlights dimmed slightly as it approached. Plate? Daniel asked. Marcus enhanced the frame. The numbers appeared clearly. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's the one Pierce flagged. Maya felt her heart begin to pound. That's Hale? Marcus nodded once. Yes. Daniel's voice remained steady. Call Pierce. Marcus pressed the phone and switched to speaker. Pierce answered immediately. Tell me you see it. Marcus replied. Black sedan. Just turned onto our block. Pierce's voice sharpened. That's him. Marcus glanced toward Daniel. You still want him to come here? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. Pierce sighed on the other end of the line. My units are 2 minutes away. Daniel answered quietly. That may be too late. Marcus watched the monitor carefully. The sedan slowed. Then it stopped halfway down the block. The engine remained running, but the driver did not step out. Maya leaned forward. Why is he waiting? Marcus narrowed his eyes. Because he's thinking. Daniel studied the screen. Or confirming something. The sedan's driver door finally opened. A tall man stepped out. He wore a dark coat and moved with the calm confidence of someone who had spent many years controlling dangerous situations. Even from the grainy security footage, his presence felt unmistakable. Marcus spoke quietly. That's Victor Hale. Maya stared at the screen. The man looked nothing like she had imagined. He didn't appear violent or frantic. He looked composed, almost patient. Victor Hale stood beside the car for a moment, studying the townhouse at the end of the street. Then he began walking toward it. Inside the living room, Marcus reached for the small radio clipped to his jacket. Exterior team. A voice answered immediately. We see him, Marcus replied. Hold position. Maya looked at Daniel. You're letting him walk up here? Daniel nodded. Yes, Marcus added quietly. If we grab him in the street, He disappears into lawyers before sunrise. Maya understood. They needed him to act. Outside, Hale continued walking. His footsteps echoed faintly across the quiet pavement. Halfway down the block, he stopped again. He looked up at the townhouse. Then something unexpected happened. Hale smiled. Marcus frowned. "That's not the reaction I expected," Daniel said quietly. "He knows." Marcus looked at him. "Knows what?" "That the trap worked." Maya felt the tension in the room tighten. "If he knows that," Marcus finished the thought. "Then why come here?" Daniel answered calmly. "Because Hale does not like unfinished business." The front security camera showed Hale stepping onto the sidewalk directly in front of the townhouse. He paused beside the iron gate. Then he spoke, even though he stood outside. The microphone built into the camera carried his voice into the living room speakers. "Mr. Whitmore." The calm voice filled the room. "I know you're watching." Marcus glanced at Daniel. "Well, he's direct." Daniel remained still. Outside, Hale placed his hands in the pockets of his coat. "I believe we should talk," Marcus muttered quietly. "That's new." Daniel walked toward the front door. Maya stood immediately. "What are you doing?" Daniel answered simply. "Meeting him." Marcus followed. "You sure about that?" "Yes." Marcus opened the door but kept one hand near the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Cold night air flowed into the hallway. Victor Hale stood a few feet away beneath the streetlight. For several seconds, the two men simply looked at each other. Daniel Whitmore and Victor Hale, the billionaire and the criminal who had tried to kidnap him. Hale finally spoke first. "Well," he said calmly, "this evening did not go exactly as planned." Marcus stood slightly behind Daniel, watching every movement. Daniel replied in the same steady tone. "No." Hale glanced briefly toward the police lights now approaching from the far end of the street. "I imagine your detective friend is coming." Daniel nodded. "Yes." Hale sighed softly. "That complicates things," Marcus asked bluntly. "Then why show up?" Hale looked at him briefly, then back at Daniel. "Because I wanted to see the man who ruined my plan." Daniel didn't react. Hale studied him carefully. "You're calmer than most people would be," Daniel answered quietly. "You expected fear." Hale smiled slightly. "Yes." Daniel added one final sentence. "Unfortunately for you," he stepped forward slightly, "fear is not something I find useful." Victor Hale stood beneath the porch light, the faint glow casting long shadows across the wet pavement. For a moment, the two men simply faced each other in silence, the quiet of the block amplifying the tension between them. Behind Daniel Whitmore, Marcus Reed stood slightly to the side, watching Hale's hands carefully. Inside the house, Maya Williams remained near the doorway of the living room, barely breathing, as she tried to hear every word. Hale's eyes moved slowly across Daniel's face, studying him with a calm curiosity that seemed almost unsettling. "I have to admit," Hale said, his voice steady, "this evening has been educational." Daniel Whitmore did not move. His posture remained relaxed, his hands loosely at his sides. "You attempted a kidnapping," Daniel said calmly. "Education seems an unusual description." Hale gave a faint smile. "Well, plans evolve. Sometimes we learn from mistakes," Marcus muttered quietly under his breath. "You made several tonight." Hale glanced briefly toward Marcus but did not respond to the comment. His attention returned to Daniel. "You prepared well," Hale continued. "Police, surveillance, countermeasures. Most impressive." Daniel's expression did not change. "You expected less." "I expected greed," Hale replied. "Fear usually comes later." Behind Daniel, Marcus shifted slightly, keeping his stance between Hale and the interior of the house. From the far end of the street, the faint sound of approaching sirens began to grow louder. Hale noticed it too. "Your detective friends are almost here," he said. Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Hale looked up at the townhouse windows, then back at Daniel. "And yet, you opened the door." Marcus couldn't help himself. "You knocked." Hale's smile widened slightly. "Fair point." For several seconds, the three men stood in silence while the distant police sirens grew louder. Finally, Hale spoke again. "You know why I came personally tonight?" Daniel answered immediately. "Control." Hale nodded slowly. "Exactly." He took a small step closer, still remaining outside the gate. "Men like me do not enjoy losing control of a situation," Marcus replied dryly. "You lost quite a bit tonight." Hale ignored the comment. I also do not enjoy misunderstandings. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Attempted kidnapping rarely qualifies as misunderstanding. Hale shrugged slightly. Your schedule was predictable. My associates saw an opportunity, and I stopped them. Yes. Hale studied Daniel's face again, as if measuring something invisible, which raises a question, he said quietly. Daniel waited. Hale tilted his head slightly. Why did the girl run to you? Inside the house, Maya felt her stomach tighten. Marcus noticed the shift in Daniel's posture but said nothing. Daniel answered simply, because she understood the difference between right and wrong. Hale chuckled softly. That's a charming way to describe betrayal. Marcus's voice sharpened slightly. She warned him about your plan. Yes, Hale said calmly. She did. For the first time that evening, his expression hardened just a little. Her father was in debt, Hale continued. I offered him an opportunity to resolve that problem. Daniel's voice remained calm. By selling his daughter. Hale shrugged again. People make unfortunate choices under pressure. Maya felt her hands clench. Daniel spoke quietly. You exploit desperation. Hale gave a thin smile. I provide solutions. Marcus shook his head. You're a criminal. Hale's eyes flicked toward Marcus again. That is a matter of perspective. The sound of approaching police cars now echoed clearly down the block. Blue and red lights flashed at the far corner. Hale glanced briefly in that direction. Well, he said softly. Our conversation appears to be ending sooner than expected. Daniel remained perfectly still. You could have left the city. Yes, Hale admitted, but that would suggest defeat. Marcus gave a short laugh. You already lost. Hale's gaze returned to Daniel. Perhaps. Then he added quietly. Or perhaps this is only the first move. Daniel studied him carefully. You're threatening me. Hale shook his head. No. He gestured lightly toward the street. I'm explaining reality. Police vehicles were now turning onto the block. Officers stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Detective Pierce moved quickly toward the townhouse, his hand already resting near his badge. Hale watched the approaching officers with mild interest. He said softly. Right on time. Pierce stopped a few feet away. Victor Hale. Hale turned toward him. Detective. Pierce's voice hardened. You're under investigation for multiple crimes. Hale nodded politely. I suspected as much. Pierce stepped forward. You should come with us. Marcus expected Hale to resist, but instead Hale did something unexpected. He raised his hands calmly. I have no intention of running tonight. Marcus frowned slightly. That's new. Hale glanced back toward Daniel. Running would only delay the inevitable. Pierce approached and placed the handcuffs around Hale's wrists. You have the right to remain silent, Pierce began. Hale listened without interrupting. As the detective finished, Hale turned his head slightly toward Daniel one last time. You protected yourself well tonight, he said quietly. Daniel did not respond. Hale's eyes shifted briefly toward the house behind Daniel. And the girl. Marcus's posture tightened. You leave her out of this. Hale smiled faintly. Everything has consequences, Mr. Reed. Pierce pulled Hale toward the police vehicle. Save it for the judge. Hale allowed himself to be guided away. Before entering the car, he looked back once more at Daniel Whitmore. You stopped a kidnapping tonight, Hale said calmly. Daniel remained silent. Hale added one final sentence. But the world you live in, his voice dropped slightly, is not finished with men like me. The police door closed. The car drove away. The flashing lights slowly disappeared down the street. For several seconds, the block fell quiet again. Marcus exhaled slowly. Well, Daniel looked down the empty road. Yes. Marcus folded his arms. That was a strange ending. Daniel spoke quietly. No. Marcus glanced at him. What do you mean? Daniel Whitmore answered calmly. It was only the beginning. The flashing police lights disappeared slowly at the end of the block, leaving the quiet street once again under the soft glow of the street lamps. For a few moments after the patrol cars turned the corner, no one spoke. Marcus Reed stood beside the open doorway, watching the empty road where Victor Hale had just been taken away. Well, Marcus finally said, letting out a long breath. That was one way to end a night. Daniel Whitmore remained on the front step, his gaze still fixed down the street. No, he said calmly. Marcus glanced at him. No, that was not the end. Marcus folded his arms. You really don't like peaceful conclusions, do you? Daniel turned back toward the house. Peaceful conclusions rarely come from violent beginnings. Inside the living room, Maya Williams stood near the doorway where she had been listening to everything. When Daniel stepped back into the house, her eyes immediately searched his face. "They took him?" she asked. Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Maya exhaled slowly. A tension she had been holding for 2 days finally beginning to loosen in her chest. "Then it's over." Marcus closed the door and locked it again. "Let's hope so." Mrs. Jenkins appeared from the hallway with the calm composure she always seemed to carry. "Mr. Whitmore," she said gently, "Detective Pierce asked me to remind you he will call tomorrow morning." Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins." She looked toward Maya with quiet kindness. "Perhaps now we can all get some rest." Marcus chuckled softly. "That sounds like a great idea." But Maya did not move. Instead, she walked slowly toward the window and looked out at the empty street. Her voice was quiet when she spoke again. "My father will know." Marcus C. Hill. "Probably." Maya turned. "He'll know, I warned you." Daniel answered calmly. "Yes." Marcus leaned against the wall. "And Hale being arrested won't make your father's situation any better." Maya lowered her eyes. "I didn't want any of this." Daniel stepped closer. "But you still chose to stop it." She nodded faintly. "I couldn't let them kidnap someone." Marcus gave a small smile. "That decision saved more people than you realize." Maya looked confused. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured toward the door. "Victor Hale has been running operations across this city for years." Daniel added quietly, "Tonight may be the first time someone forced him into the open." Maya absorbed those words slowly. For a moment the room grew quiet again. Outside, a light wind brushed across the street, carrying the distant sound of a train somewhere beneath the city. Marcus checked his watch. "Onbier, uch p.m. Long night," he muttered. Daniel nodded. "Yes." Marcus stretched his shoulders. "I'm going to double-check the exterior cameras." Daniel gave a small nod of approval. Marcus walked toward the security monitor wall and began scanning the feeds again. Front, sidewalk, rear alley, courtyard. Everything remained quiet. Across the room, Maya finally sat down. Her body felt exhausted now that the tension had begun to fade. For the first time since she had escaped the apartment in Queens, the world around her felt still. Daniel sat in the chair near the fireplace. For several minutes he said nothing. Then he spoke. "Miss Williams." Maya looked up. "Yes? You do not need to return to your father's apartment." Marcus glanced over. "That's a good idea." Maya frowned slightly. "But I don't have anywhere else." Daniel answered calmly. "You may stay here until the situation is resolved." Maya blinked in surprise. "Here?" Marcus shrugged. "Safer than most places right now." Maya hesitated. "You do that?" Daniel nodded once. "You helped prevent a crime," Marcus added with a grin. "A pretty big one." Maya felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Gratitude, relief, and something else she hadn't expected. Hope. She looked at Daniel. "Thank you." Daniel simply nodded. Across the room, Marcus suddenly spoke again. "Well, looks like the street is finally quiet." Daniel looked toward the monitor. The cameras showed nothing but the empty sidewalk and the faint glow of the streetlights. Marcus leaned back slightly. "For once, the bad guys are in handcuffs." Daniel remained thoughtful. "Perhaps." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You still think Hale has something planned?" Daniel answered calmly. "Hale built an empire through fear and debt." Marcus nodded. "True. Men like that rarely operate alone." Marcus considered that, meaning someone else may try to continue what he started. Daniel looked toward Maya. "Which is why we remain careful." Maya nodded slowly. "I understand." Mrs. Jenkins returned quietly with a fresh pot of coffee and set it on the table. "I suspect tonight has been exhausting for everyone," she said gently. Marcus smiled. "You have no idea." Daniel stood. "We will continue this tomorrow." Marcus nodded. "Works for me." Maya rose as well. For a moment she looked once more toward the dark street through the window. 2 days earlier she had been running for her life through the freezing night. Now she was standing inside a house where powerful people were already preparing to rebuild the damage Victor Hale had left behind. Daniel walked toward the hallway. Before leaving the room, he paused and looked back. "There is something you should remember," he said quietly. Maya listened. Marcus looked up from the monitors. Daniel's voice carried the calm certainty it always seemed to have. Tonight was not only about stopping a crime. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Then what was it about?" Daniel Whitmore answered with the same steady tone. "It was about proving something." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What?" Daniel looked toward the quiet street beyond the window. That even in a world built on fear, he paused. One person choosing to do the right thing can change the outcome of everything.